My name is Karen, 35 years old, and I never imagined I'd be telling this story. It was supposed to be a joyous celebration for my mother in law, Virginia's 70th birthday. Instead, it became the moment that changed everything. When she handed out iPhone 16 Pro Max phones to all her grandchildren, but my daughter Beverly, the words she said next shattered our world. Because she's not part of the family. What happened in the next 24 hours would expose decades of secrets and lies. If you've ever experienced injustice within your own family, hit like and subscribe, and I'll tell you how I resolved this situation once and for all. I've always been the type of person who believes in hard work and family values. As a senior accountant at a financial firm in Boston, I pride myself on attention to detail and doing things by the book. My 14-year-old daughter Beverly inherited that same methodical mindset, along with her father Alan's gentle spirit and kind heart. Alan was my first husband. We met in college, fell deeply in love, and married young. Beverly was just 4 years old when Alan was killed in a horrific car accident on his way home from work. The drunk driver who hit him walked away with barely a scratch, while I was left a widow with a heartbroken little girl who couldn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home anymore. For 3 years, Beverly and I rebuilt our lives one day at a time. I focused on my career, moved us into a small but comfortable apartment, and made sure Beverly had everything she needed. We were managing okay until I met Samuel at a friend's barbecue in the summer of 2016. Samuel was kind, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in both my happiness and Beverly's well-being. After dating for almost a year, we got married in a small ceremony. I truly believed we were starting a new chapter filled with happiness and healing. What I didn't realize was that Samuel's family came with complications I couldn't have imagined. His mother, Virginia, had always been the matriarch who ruled with an iron fist. His older sister, Margaret, worshipped the ground Virginia walked on and followed her lead in everything. Margaret's husband, Theodore, was equally devoted to maintaining Virginia's approval, and their 3 children, 13-year-old Diane, 11-year-old Patricia, and 9-year-old Jane, were being raised to continue this family dynamic. From the moment I joined the family, there was an unspoken tension. Virginia would often forget to include Beverly in family gatherings, or give her significantly less expensive gifts than her other grandchildren. When I confronted Samuel about this, he would shrug it off with, "That's just how Mom is," or "Don't make a big deal out of nothing." One Christmas, Virginia gave Diane, Patricia, and Jane beautiful handcrafted dollhouses that must have cost at least $300 each. Beverly received a $10 coloring book. When I saw the disappointment in my daughter's eyes, I confronted Virginia privately. I noticed Beverly's gift was quite different from what the other girls received, I said carefully. Virginia's response was chilling. "Well, she's not really my grandchild, is she? Just because Samuel decided to play daddy doesn't mean I have to pretend." I was stunned into silence. How could anyone be so deliberately cruel to an innocent child? Over the years, the slights continued. Beverly would be excluded from summer trips to Virginia's lake house. She wouldn't be invited to special grandmother-granddaughter lunches. At family photos, Virginia would position Beverly at the edge, sometimes even suggesting she sit this one out so they could get just family. Each time Samuel would make excuses. "Mom's from a different generation. She doesn't mean anything by it. Beverly has you, she doesn't need Mom's approval." But a child knows when they're unwanted. I watched my bright, loving daughter grow quieter around Samuel's family. She stopped asking to attend family events. She would shrink into herself whenever Virginia entered the room. What hurt most was seeing her try so hard to win approval that would never come. Margaret was no better than her mother. She would make little comments within Beverly's hearing. It must be so hard to raise someone else's child. Beverly certainly doesn't look like she belongs in this family. Imagine taking on another woman's leftover life. I tried everything to improve the situation. I invited Virginia for private lunches to get to know each other better. I encouraged Beverly to make handmade cards and gifts to show her affection. I even tried appealing to Margaret's maternal instincts, hoping she might influence her mother. Nothing worked. If anything, the distance grew wider, the slights more obvious. Samuel continued to stand on the sidelines, unwilling to challenge his mother or sister, afraid to rock the boat that had carried his family for generations. For 8 long years, I watched this silent rejection chip away at my daughter's self-esteem. I questioned whether staying in this marriage was worth the emotional cost to Beverly. But I also saw how Samuel genuinely loved her in his own way, how he tried to compensate for his family's coldness with his own warmth when we were alone. I kept hoping that time would soften Virginia's heart, that she would eventually see the wonderful person Beverly was growing into. I kept believing that family meant something more than shared DNA. I was wrong. So terribly, catastrophically wrong. The Landmark Hotel in downtown Boston was Virginia's venue of choice for her 70th birthday celebration. The private dining room was decorated with elegant floral arrangements, fine china gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and a professional photographer circulated documenting what was supposed to be a joyous family milestone. I had spent hours helping Beverly prepare for this event. Despite years of subtle rejection, my daughter still desperately wanted to be accepted by her step-grandmother. She had saved her allowance for months to buy materials for a handmade scrapbook filled with family photos and heartfelt messages. She had carefully selected a navy blue dress that matched the family color scheme Virginia had requested. She had even practiced her smile in the mirror, determined not to show how nervous she was. "Do you think Grandma Virginia will like my gift, Mom?" she asked, as we drove to the hotel. "She'll love it, honey," I said, hoping with all my heart that this time would be different. "You put so much thought into it." When we arrived, Virginia was holding court at the head of the table, resplendent in an expensive silver dress, with Margaret at her right hand. Samuel kissed his mother's cheek, and we took our assigned seats. Beverly and I placed at the far end of the table, separated from Virginia by Theodore, Margaret, and their daughters. The evening proceeded with calculated precision. Virginia opened each gift with theatrical appreciation, exclaiming over Margaret's diamond bracelet, Theodore's first edition book, and even Samuel's relatively modest cashmere sweater set. When Beverly timidly approached with her handmade scrapbook, Virginia barely glanced at it before setting it aside. "How creative," she said dismissively. "Now I have a very special announcement to make." The room quieted as Virginia signaled to Theodore, who disappeared momentarily before returning with a large shopping bag. "In celebration of reaching this milestone birthday," Virginia announced, "I wanted to do something extraordinary for my grandchildren who represent the future of our family." She reached into the bag and pulled out an elegantly wrapped box with Diane's name on it. Inside was a brand new iPhone 16 Pro Max in gleaming titanium blue. Diane squealed with delight as Virginia presented her with the $3,000 device. "For my darling Patricia," Virginia continued, producing another box containing an identical phone in titanium black. "And for my sweet Jane," she finished, handing over a third iPhone in titanium white. The three sisters immediately began comparing their new treasures, exclaiming over features and taking selfies. Beverly sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, a small, hopeful smile still on her face. The silence stretched until I couldn't bear it any longer. "Virginia," I said quietly, "did you perhaps forget something?" Virginia's smile was cold as winter. "No, Karen, I don't believe I did." "But Beverly," I began. "Oh," Virginia interrupted loudly enough for the entire table to hear. "There's nothing for Beverly because she's not part of the family." The room went deadly silent. I felt as though I'd been slapped. Beverly's face crumpled, her eyes filling with tears she desperately tried to hold back. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice barely controlled. "I said what everyone knows but is too polite to mention," Virginia replied, sipping her champagne. "Beverly is your child from a previous marriage. She's not Samuel's daughter. She's not my grandchild. She's not a part of this family." Beverly pushed back her chair, the scrape against the hardwood floor like a scream in the silent room. Without a word, she ran from the dining room shoulders, shaking with suppressed sobs. I looked at Samuel, willing him to say something, anything to defend his stepdaughter. He sat frozen, looking between his mother and the door Beverly had just fled through, conflict written across his face. "Samuel," I prompted. "Mom, that was unnecessary," he finally mumbled. "Unnecessary. It was the truth," Margaret interjected. "We've been pretending for years, and quite frankly, it's exhausting." I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate care, fighting to maintain my composure in front of these people who had just brutally wounded my child. "If you'll excuse me," I said with all the dignity I could muster, "I need to check on my daughter." As I walked out, I heard Virginia's voice behind me. "So sensitive. This is why outsiders shouldn't be included in family events." I found Beverly huddled in the hotel lobby, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold the broken pieces together. When she saw me, she collapsed into my arms, her body heaving with sobs. "Why does she hate me so much, Mom?" she asked between gasps. "What did I ever do to her?" I guided her outside to our car where we could have privacy. Sitting in the parking garage, I held my daughter while she cried out 8 years of accumulated rejection. "You didn't do anything wrong, Bev," I assured her, brushing hair from her tear-streaked face. "This isn't about you. It's about Virginia and her twisted idea of what makes a family." "But even Samuel didn't stand up for me," Beverly whispered, and the betrayal in her voice broke my heart anew. "I know, honey, and that's not okay." I took a deep breath. I think it's time I stopped hoping things would improve on their own. Beverly looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "What are you going to do?" "First, I'm going to make sure you're okay." "Do you want me to take you home now?" She squared her shoulders with a determination that made me so proud. "No, I don't want them to think they drove me away for good. I want to go back in there with you." "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Dad always said we should face our problems head on." Alan would have been so proud of the strength our daughter was showing. I hugged her tight. Then we touched up her makeup with tissues and water from a bottle I had in the car. "Let's go," I said, and we walked back into the hotel, hand in hand. When we returned to the private dining room, the celebration was continuing as if nothing had happened. Virginia was telling a story about her recent cruise while Margaret laughed appreciatively. The 3 granddaughters were still absorbed in their new phones. Samuel looked up as we entered, relief crossing his face. "Virginia," I said, clearly interrupting her story, "we need to talk about what just happened." Virginia sighed dramatically. "Must we make a scene, Karen? It's my birthday." "Yes, we must," I replied, standing directly across from her. "You deliberately hurt my daughter, and I want to know why." "I've already explained myself," Virginia said dismissively. "I have no obligation to someone with no blood relation to me." "Beverly is Samuel's stepdaughter," I said. "He's been in her life for 8 years, since she was 6 years old. That makes her family." Margaret scoffed. "Playing house doesn't make someone family. Blood makes family." "So Theodore isn't family either," I challenged. "He married in just like I did." "That's different," Margaret snapped. "How?" I demanded. "Theodore married Margaret before they had children," Virginia interjected. "He's the father of my actual grandchildren. You came with baggage." "Baggage?" I repeated incredulously. "My daughter is not baggage," Samuel finally spoke up. "Mom, can we just enjoy your birthday, Karen? Let's not make this a bigger issue than it needs to be." I stared at him in disbelief. "A bigger issue? Your mother just told your stepdaughter to her face that she's not part of this family, and you want to just move on." "You're overreacting," Margaret said. "Beverly should understand her place by now." "Her place?" Beverly spoke up, her voice small but steady. "What exactly is my place, Aunt Margaret?" Margaret at least had the decency to look uncomfortable at being directly addressed by the girl she'd just helped humiliate. "Well, you're not exactly... I'm not exactly what..." Beverly pressed. You're not a Franklin, Virginia stated bluntly, referring to their family name. You're a Wilson from your father. You don't belong in our family photos or our family traditions. I'd had enough. 8 years of subtle cruelty had culminated in this moment of naked rejection, and I would not stand for it anymore. Virginia, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I have tried for years to respect you as Samuel's mother and as Beverly's step-grandmother. I have overlooked your slights, excused your behavior, and encouraged Beverly to keep trying to win your approval. That ends today. I stepped closer to her, noting with satisfaction how she drew back slightly. You have exactly 24 hours to apologize to Beverly sincerely and completely for what you said tonight and for how you've treated her for 8 years. Virginia laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. Or what exactly? You have no power here, Karen. 24 hours, I repeated with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. After that, you won't like what happens next. Margaret stood up, her chair scraping back. Are you threatening my mother at her birthday dinner? I'm promising consequences for cruelty, I corrected her. Something that's long overdue in this family. You're ruining everything as usual, Theodore complained, putting a protective arm around Margaret. The three cousins watched wide-eyed, their new iPhones temporarily forgotten in the face of this unprecedented confrontation. Samuel looked panicked. Karen, please, let's just go home and talk about this. Yes, Samuel. I agreed, my eyes still locked with Virginia's. Let's go home. Beverly and I have a lot to discuss about our future with this family. As we walked out for the second time that night, I heard Virginia call after us. Samuel, don't let her manipulate you like this. She's always trying to drive a wedge between you and your real family. I kept walking, Beverly's hand clutched tightly in mine, and didn't look back. Once home, I sent Beverly to bed with a mug of hot chocolate and a promise that things would get better. After she fell asleep, I sat at our home office computer and began to dig. For years, I had maintained a polite distance from the Franklin family finances despite my accounting background. Samuel handled his own money and I handled mine with a joint account for household expenses. But something about Virginia's extravagant gift to her real grandchildren had triggered my professional suspicions. $3,000 per phone plus tax accessories and service plans. Where had a retired schoolteacher gotten over $10,000 for spontaneous gifts? Virginia lived well, but she wasn't wealthy. Or at least she shouldn't have been. I started with what I knew. Samuel's father, George, had died when Samuel was in college. George had owned a moderately successful construction company that Virginia had sold after his death. The proceeds had supposedly been divided between Virginia, Margaret, and Samuel, with Virginia receiving the largest share as the widow. I pulled up our family document files, searching for anything related to George's will or the business sale. There wasn't much, just a single-page summary Samuel had shown me years ago when we were combining households. Next, I checked our joint account records. Samuel deposited his portion of his teaching salary regularly, and I contributed my share from my accounting job. Nothing unusual there. Then I looked at the college fund we had established for Beverly. Alan had left a substantial life insurance policy specifically designated for Beverly's education. As her legal guardian, I had set up the account and named Samuel as a secondary administrator after we married, thinking it showed trust and commitment to our blended family. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 3 years, there had been multiple withdrawals from Beverly's college fund ranging from $500 to $5,000. Each withdrawal had been authorized by Samuel. The total missing amount was just over $75,000, more than half of what Alan had left for our daughter's future. My hands shaking, I picked up my phone and called Brenda, my best friend since college, and conveniently a family law attorney. Karen, she answered groggily. It's after midnight. Is everything okay? No, I said, my voice breaking. I need your help. It's about Beverly's college fund. 20 minutes later, I had explained everything: Virginia's cruel rejection, the missing money, my suspicions that Samuel's family was somehow involved. Karen, this is serious, Brenda said, fully awake now. If what you're suggesting is true, we're looking at financial fraud, possibly even elder abuse if Virginia was manipulated into altering George's will. You need more evidence before making accusations. How do I get that evidence? I asked. First, we need complete copies of George's will and the business sale documents. Then we need to track where those withdrawals from Beverly's account actually went. Do you have access to Samuel's personal accounts? No, I admitted. We've always kept those separate. Then you need to confront him, Brenda advised. Show him what you found and gauge his reaction. If he's involved, he'll either confess or panic. If he's been manipulated by his mother and sister, he needs to know. After we hung up, I sat staring at the financial records until the numbers blurred before my eyes. How had I missed this? I was an accountant, for God's sake. But I had trusted Samuel with our family finances, believed he shared my commitment to Beverly's future. The next morning after Beverly left for school, I confronted Samuel in our kitchen. I know about the withdrawals from Beverly's college fund, I said without preamble, sliding the printed bank statements across the counter. Samuel's face went ashen. Karen, I can explain. Please do, I said coldly. Explain why $75,000 of my dead husband's insurance money meant for our daughter's education has disappeared. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, he stammered. Mom needed some help with medical bills, and then Margaret's family had some financial trouble after Theodore lost his job. So you stole from Beverly to help them. I was incredulous, without even discussing it with me. I was going to pay it back, he insisted. Mom promised they would return the money once they sold the lake house. The lake house that Beverly isn't welcome at, I laughed bitterly. The lake house where your mother takes her real grandchildren every summer. Samuel looked miserable. Karen, please. They're my family. And what is Beverly? I demanded. What am I? Aren't we your family too? He couldn't meet my eyes. Of course you are. It's just complicated. No, Samuel. It's actually very simple. You chose your mother and sister over your wife and stepdaughter. You allowed them to mistreat Beverly for years, and then you helped them steal her future. I slid another piece of paper across the counter, a contact sheet for Howard Davis, a private investigator Brenda had recommended. I've hired Mr. Davis to investigate your family's finances, particularly anything related to your father's estate and business. I suspect what happened to Beverly's college fund is just the tip of the iceberg. Samuel's face crumpled. Karen, don't do this. Please, you'll tear the family apart. Your mother already did that last night, I replied. Now I'm just finding out how deep the damage goes. What do you want me to do? He asked weakly. I want you to decide right now where you stand, with Beverly and me, or with your mother and sister, because I'm done pretending we can all be one big, happy family. Samuel buried his face in his hands. I need time to think. You have 24 hours, I said, echoing my ultimatum to Virginia. Then I'm taking everything I've found to the police. Over the next day, I worked with Brenda and Howard to build our case. Howard's initial findings exceeded even my worst suspicions. Not only had Virginia and Margaret systematically drained Beverly's college fund through Samuel, they had also apparently been embezzling from other family members for years. George's brother Harold had left a trust fund for his niece and nephew that Virginia had somehow gained control of. There were questionable property transfers, suspicious tax filings, and evidence that Virginia had manipulated her husband's will after his death. Most damning of all, Howard discovered that the construction company had been worth nearly 3 times what Virginia had reported to Samuel and Margaret. The extra money had disappeared into offshore accounts that only Virginia could access. Meanwhile, I contacted Margaret under the guise of trying to smooth things over after the birthday disaster. She agreed to meet me for coffee, smug in her belief that I was coming to apologize. At the cafe, I secretly recorded our conversation on my phone, legal in our state, as long as one party consented. Margaret, I just want to understand why Virginia treats Beverly so differently, I began innocently. Margaret sipped her latte, her expression superior. Karen, let's be adults here. Beverly isn't a Franklin. She's not entitled to the Franklin family resources. Resources like George's inheritance, I probed. Exactly. Margaret nodded. Dad worked hard to build that business for his real family. Why should some random child from your previous marriage benefit from that? But Samuel has been Beverly's stepfather for 8 years, I pointed out. Doesn't that count for anything? Margaret laughed. Samuel was always too soft. Mom and I had to really work on him to make sure he protected the family's interests. Protected how? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Financial protection, of course. Making sure assets stay within the bloodline. She leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Do you know how hard Mom and I had to push to get Samuel to help with Mom's investments? He was so worried about that college fund, as if Beverly couldn't just get student loans like normal people. So it was your idea to use Beverly's college money. I clarified, my heart pounding. Well, Mom spotted the opportunity, but I helped convince Samuel it was the right thing to do. We needed capital for some investments, and that money was just sitting there. She smiled, clearly proud of herself. It was much better than Mom having to sell stocks or property, and it's not like we won't pay it back eventually. Of course, I said, fighting to keep my expression neutral. And I assume these were good investments. Excellent ones, Margaret boasted. We've almost doubled the initial investment. Of course, that goes back into the family pool, not to Beverly specifically. The family pool, I repeated. And who controls that? Mom does with my help, Margaret said. Samuel isn't good with money. That's why we needed to guide him in the right direction after Dad died. Guide him how? I asked. Margaret's expression grew guarded, as she perhaps realized she'd said too much. Just helping him understand his responsibilities to the family. Look, Karen, I know you're upset about what Mom said, but you need to accept reality. You and Beverly are outsiders. You always will be. I nodded slowly, having gotten what I came for. Thank you for being so honest, Margaret. It really clarifies things. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Howard. He had tracked down a former secretary from George's construction company who had witnessed some highly irregular activities before and after George's death. According to Ms. Norma Jenkins, Howard explained Virginia had been siphoning company funds for years, possibly with George unaware. After his death, she forced the company's financial officer to alter records before the business was sold. Can Ms. Jenkins testify to this? I asked. She's willing to provide a sworn statement, Howard confirmed. And she kept copies of some of the original documents that contradict the official sale records. By evening, Samuel returned home looking exhausted and conflicted. I spoke with Mom today, he admitted, sinking into our couch. She says you're trying to destroy our family out of jealousy, that you've always been resentful of not being fully accepted. And what do you think, Samuel? I asked quietly. He rubbed his face. I don't know what to think anymore. I love you and Beverly, but they're my mother and sister. Your mother and sister who stole from your stepdaughter, I reminded him. Your mother and sister who have been manipulating you for years. They wouldn't do that, he protested, but without conviction. I laid out everything I'd discovered, the embezzled company funds, the manipulated will, Margaret's recorded confession about the college fund, the pattern of financial abuse spanning decades. Samuel listened in horrified silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. This can't be true, he whispered when I finished. It is true, I said firmly. And now you have to decide, are you going to continue enabling them, or are you going to stand with me and Beverly? Before he could answer, my phone rang. It was Brenda. Karen, Virginia just filed for an emergency injunction against you, she said without preamble. She's claiming harassment and defamation. There's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. She's trying to silence me, I realized. Exactly, Brenda agreed. But this might work in our favor. A courtroom is the perfect place to present our evidence. After I hung up, I turned to Samuel. Your mother is taking me to court tomorrow. She's trying to shut me up before I can expose what she's done. Samuel looked sick. Karen, please, there must be another way. There isn't, I said firmly. Not anymore. This has gone too far for too long. Later that night, as I prepared my documents for court, my phone buzzed with a text from Virginia. You've made a serious mistake. I have resources and connections you can't imagine. Back down now, or you'll regret it. I replied with a single smiling emoji and the words, "See you in court." The Boston County Courthouse was imposing its granite facade, a symbol of the justice I hoped to find inside. Brenda met me on the steps, briefcase in hand, her expression professionally neutral. "Ready for this?" she asked. "More than ready," I confirmed. Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Virginia sat at the plaintiff's table, looking regal in an expensive navy suit, Margaret beside her. Their attorney, Vernon Blackwell, was a well-known figure in Boston legal circles, known for representing wealthy clients in delicate matters. Samuel had decided to come but was sitting in the gallery rather than with either party, his expression tormented. Beverly had wanted to attend, but I'd insisted she go to school instead. This wasn't a burden she needed to bear. Judge Alice Montgomery entered, and we all rose. After the preliminary formalities, Vernon Blackwell presented Virginia's case. Your Honor, my client, a respected retired educator and community member, has been subjected to a campaign of harassment and defamation by her daughter-in-law, Karen Franklin, Mrs. Franklin has made baseless accusations of financial impropriety, contacted business associates with slanderous claims, and created discord within a formerly harmonious family, all stemming from an unfortunate misunderstanding at a family gathering. Judge Montgomery nodded. And the nature of this misunderstanding? Virginia dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. It was my 70th birthday, Your Honor. I had purchased gifts for my grandchildren, but my daughter-in-law became upset that her daughter from a previous marriage wasn't included. She caused a scene, threatened me, and has since been attempting to turn my son against me with wild accusations. I see, said the judge. Mrs. Franklin, how do you respond to these allegations? Brenda stood. Your Honor, my client categorically denies harassing Mrs. Virginia Franklin. What she has done is uncover evidence of serious financial fraud perpetrated by Mrs. Franklin and her daughter Margaret Theodore against multiple family members, including Mrs. Karen Franklin's minor daughter Beverly Wilson. Virginia scoffed audibly while Margaret whispered furiously to Vernon. That's a significant counterclaim, Judge Montgomery noted. Do you have evidence to support these allegations? Substantial evidence, Your Honor, Brenda confirmed. We have bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals from a college fund established for Beverly Wilson using life insurance proceeds from her deceased father. We have recorded statements from Margaret Theodore admitting to these withdrawals and their redirection to what she called the family pool. We have testimony from a former employee of Franklin Construction regarding financial irregularities before and after George Franklin's death. And we have documentation showing discrepancies between the reported value of Franklin Construction at the time of its sale and its actual market value. Vernon Blackwell jumped to his feet. Your Honor, these wild accusations are precisely what we're here to stop. Mrs. Karen Franklin is vindictively attacking her mother-in-law because of a perceived slight to her daughter. These financial matters are completely irrelevant to the matter at hand. On the contrary, Brenda replied calmly, they establish motive. Virginia Franklin has systematically excluded Beverly Wilson from the family while simultaneously misappropriating funds designated for Beverly's education. We believe this pattern of behavior constitutes not just family discord, but actionable fraud. Judge Montgomery studied both sides thoughtfully. I'd like to review this evidence. Mrs. Franklin, please approach and present what you have. I handed Brenda the USB drive containing all our documentation, and she presented it to the court clerk. As the judge reviewed the material on her computer, Virginia whispered urgently to Vernon, who looked increasingly concerned. After several tense minutes, Judge Montgomery looked up. This is certainly troubling information that warrants further investigation. However, it extends beyond the scope of today's hearing. Mr. Blackwell, does your client wish to proceed with her request for an injunction in light of this evidence? Vernon conferred briefly with Virginia and Margaret before addressing the court. Your Honor, in the interest of family harmony, my client would like to withdraw her petition and handle these matters privately. That's no longer possible, I said, standing despite Brenda's warning hand on my arm. Your Honor, there's one more piece of evidence that puts this entire situation in context. Judge Montgomery raised an eyebrow. Proceed, Mrs. Franklin, but briefly. I took a deep breath. Your Honor, as part of our investigation, we conducted a DNA test comparing my daughter Beverly to her stepfather, Samuel Franklin. Virginia went rigid in her seat. The results showed a familial match, but not the one we expected. Beverly Wilson is not just Samuel's stepdaughter. She is Virginia Franklin's biological granddaughter. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Samuel looked utterly bewildered. My late husband, Alan Wilson, was adopted as an infant. His birth mother was Virginia Franklin, who gave him up while she was still in college before she met and married George Franklin. Alan never knew he was adopted, and I only discovered this connection through our investigation. Virginia had gone deathly pale. Margaret was staring at her mother in shock. For years, I continued, Virginia has rejected and mistreated her own biological granddaughter while simultaneously stealing the money left to her by her own son, whom she abandoned. She told Beverly to her face that she wasn't part of the family when in reality, Beverly has more Franklin blood than Margaret's children. Judge Montgomery looked at Virginia. Mrs. Franklin, do you wish to respond to this allegation? Virginia seemed unable to speak, her composure completely shattered. Vernon stepped in. Your Honor, my client was unaware of any such connection. If this information is accurate, it represents a profound family matter that should be addressed privately. I disagree, Brenda interjected. The financial fraud we've documented affects multiple parties and involves significant sums. We request that the court refer this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Judge Montgomery considered for a moment before delivering her ruling. I'm dismissing the petition for an injunction. Based on the evidence presented, I'm referring the financial allegations to the District Attorney for further investigation. As for the family relationship matters, those are indeed private, though they certainly cast the original complaint in a different light. She looked directly at Virginia. Mrs. Franklin, I strongly suggest you consult with your attorney about cooperating fully with the coming investigation. Court is adjourned. As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Samuel stood in the corridor looking lost. Is it true? He asked. About Alan and my mother? Yes, I confirmed gently. Howard found the adoption records. Beverly is your biological niece. Samuel closed his eyes, overwhelmed. All these years, she treated her own granddaughter like an outsider, her own son's child. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said. He shook his head. No, I'm the one who should be sorry. I let them manipulate me. I failed to protect Beverly. I failed you both. You can start making it right, I told him. But it won't be easy. There's a lot of damage to repair. Over his shoulder, I saw Virginia being escorted out by Vernon, her face a mask of shock and defeat. Our eyes met briefly across the hallway. I didn't smile or gloat. I simply held her gaze, letting her see that the truth had finally inevitably come to light. In the months that followed, justice slowly took its course. Virginia and Margaret both faced criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and financial elder abuse related to their handling of family assets. Theodore, while not directly implicated, was charged as an accessory after the fact for helping conceal financial records. The district attorney's office froze Virginia's assets, including the offshore accounts Howard had uncovered. A forensic accountant determined that over $1 million had been misappropriated from various family members over the years. Beverly's college fund was fully restored with interest. Other victims, including Samuel's uncle Harold and several cousins who had been unaware they were being defrauded, received restitution as well. Samuel filed for divorce from me not out of anger or blame, but from a recognition that our marriage had been built on an unsteady foundation. We agreed to an amicable separation with Samuel, continuing to be part of Beverly's life as her uncle rather than her stepfather. The most difficult part of the healing process was helping Beverly understand her complex family history. Learning that her father had been adopted, that Virginia was actually her biological grandmother, was overwhelming for a 14-year-old already dealing with years of rejection. So she was mean to me all this time, even though I was actually her real granddaughter? Beverly asked, struggling to make sense of it all. She didn't know, I explained gently. But that doesn't excuse how she treated you. No child deserves to be excluded like that, related by blood or not. We sought therapy both individually and together to process the trauma and betrayal. Beverly's therapist, a kind woman named Lynn, specialized in family trauma and identity issues. She helped Beverly understand that her worth wasn't determined by her genetic connections or anyone else's acceptance. Your identity is yours to define, Lynn told her. The actions of Virginia and others reflect their character, not your value. Slowly, Beverly began to rebuild her sense of self. She became interested in her biological heritage, researching the Wilson family that had adopted Alan, as well as exploring the Franklin lineage she unknowingly belonged to. Samuel made genuine efforts to repair his relationship with Beverly. No longer caught between loyalty to his mother and care for his stepdaughter, he could simply be her uncle, a role that came with less conflict and more clarity. "I'm sorry I wasn't stronger," he told Beverly during one of their outings. "I should have protected you." "You were manipulated too," Beverly said with a wisdom beyond her years. "We all were." Margaret's children, now aware that Beverly was their cousin, reached out hesitantly. Diane, the oldest at 13, sent Beverly a text message. "I'm sorry for how everyone treated you. Can we maybe start over?" It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. The cousins began a tentative relationship free from the toxic influence of their grandmother and mother. Virginia herself faced not only legal consequences, but the collapse of the carefully constructed family narrative she had maintained for decades. The revelation that she had given up a child for adoption in her youth, only to later reject that child's daughter, exposed a lifetime of secrets and lies. 6 months after the courtroom confrontation, I received a letter from Virginia's assisted living facility. After her assets were frozen, she had been forced to sell her home and move to a more modest setting. Her health had declined rapidly after her arrest, accelerated by the stress of the criminal proceedings. The letter was brief but direct. "I would like to see Beverly if she is willing. I understand if she is not." I discussed it with Beverly and her therapist, making it clear that the decision was entirely Beverly's to make. "I think I want to see her," Beverly said after consideration. "Not for her, but for me. I have questions only she can answer." We visited Virginia on a cool autumn afternoon. The woman who greeted us bore little resemblance to the imposing matriarch who had ruled her family with manipulation and cruelty. She seemed smaller, frailer, her once perfect appearance now disheveled. "Thank you for coming," she said simply, gesturing for us to sit in the small visiting area of her room. Beverly sat across from her biological grandmother, studying her face. "I have your eyes," she observed. "Dad had them too." Virginia nodded, tears forming. "Yes, I noticed that the first time I saw you at Karen and Samuel's wedding. You look so much like Alan." "Why did you give him up?" Beverly asked directly. Virginia took a shaky breath. "I was 19, unmarried. It was 1975, and the shame would have destroyed my family. I convinced myself he would have a better life with adoptive parents who were ready for a child." "And why did you treat me so badly when I came into your life?" Beverly's voice was steady, her gaze unflinching. Virginia looked down at her hands. "When I saw you, I saw the child I had given away, the mistake I had buried. the guilt I had never faced. It was easier to reject you than to acknowledge who you really were to me. That's not a good enough reason, Beverly said simply. No, Virginia agreed. It's not. Nothing could justify how I treated you, or what I did to your college fund money that your father, my son, left to secure your future. She looked up at Beverly, her eyes filled with decades of regret. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that the failing was entirely mine. You did nothing wrong. You were always worthy of love and acceptance. Beverly nodded, absorbing this. I have something for you, she said, reaching into her backpack. She pulled out a new scrapbook similar to the one she had given Virginia on her birthday, but with additional pages. Opening it, she showed Virginia photos of Alan at different ages, school pictures, and family snapshots that Virginia had never seen. This is your son, Beverly said. The one you never knew. He was kind and funny and smart. He loved playing guitar and building model airplanes. He taught me to ride a bike and make pancakes in funny shapes. He would have forgiven you, I think. He was that kind of person. Virginia touched the photos with trembling fingers, seeing for the first time the life of the child she had given away. He looks happy, she whispered. He was, I confirmed from where I stood watching. Alan had a good life. He was a good man and a wonderful father. Before we left, Virginia asked, Will you come again? Beverly considered this. Maybe. I don't know yet. I need time. Of course, Virginia nodded. Time is something I should have given long ago instead of judgment. In the car driving home, Beverly was quiet, processing the encounter. How do you feel? I asked gently. Lighter, she decided after a moment. Like I've put down something heavy I didn't know I was carrying. The criminal cases against Virginia, Margaret, and Theodore were eventually resolved through plea agreements. They avoided prison time due to their ages and health conditions, but received probation community service and were required to make full restitution to all affected family members. The Franklin family, once built on secrets and manipulation, was forever changed. Some relationships were severed completely, while others were transformed into something more honest, if more distant. Beverly continued to thrive, her resilience a constant source of pride for me. The college fund that Alan had established for her was secure again, his final gift to the daughter he had loved so completely, now protected from those who would have stolen her future. Sometimes I think about that moment at Virginia's birthday dinner when she declared so cruelly that Beverly wasn't part of the family. She couldn't have been more wrong. Beverly was the true Franklin legacy, carrying forward not just the genetic heritage, but the best qualities that family could have embodied: honesty, courage, and the capacity for growth. As for me, I've learned that family isn't defined by blood or marriage certificates or shared last names. Family is found in the people who stand by you when others walk away, who tell you the truth, when others offer comfortable lies, who see your worth when others try to diminish it. Sometimes the family you need is the one you build for yourself, one honest relationship at a time. I've also learned that the truth, no matter how long buried, has a way of surfacing. Virginia spent decades running from her past, only to have it reappear in the form of a granddaughter she couldn't bring herself to love. The very person she rejected most fiercely was the one who could have offered her the greatest healing if only she had been brave enough to embrace the truth. Have you ever discovered a shocking truth about your own family, or stood up against injustice from those who should have protected you? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Sometimes sharing our experiences is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to face your own truths, whatever they may be.